Hey everybody, welcome to the Inside Circle Call. I'm your host Chad Madden, and the purpose of the Inside Circle Call, for those of you that are joining the first time, is we interview an expert within the physical therapy industry, sometimes outside of the industry, but this is somebody that has a ton of experience. They have also a lot of success, and our guest today is, I know I say special guest a lot, this guest is very special, and I'm going to tell you why. Um, Mary, you can take a sip of coffee or something like that. I'm going to talk for a couple of minutes here.
Okay.
But as many of you know, we're just coming off of Boot Camp Atlanta, our biggest boot camp ever. And the thing that I want everybody on this call to know is Mary was really our first true partner, like the first other business that we worked with together to help private practice owners. They came to, the very first boot camps where there were 40 people here in our office here in Harrisburg. And the reason that they did that is because they have an awesome passion for private practice physical therapist. Mary also had, as part of her physical therapy career, has been a private practice owner. She is in touch with what we need. And for those of you that were on the call before we got started here, I shared with you how I'm very marketing oriented. So when I hear the term compliance, it's not that I cringe, but my brain just doesn't process it right. And Mary nails this for us. She completely understands it. It helps bringing her in an on-site visit, which I don't even think we're going to get into too much. I'll tell you how you can get details here at the end, but we brought Mary in for an on-site visit, completely revolutionized the way that we were looking at our business. And there's two big benefits to listening to what she has to say on this call. Number one is it's going to increase your income per visit. For those of you that were in Atlanta, you heard John Logar talk about increasing revenue per visit, and I could see some therapists thinking, well, we can't possibly do that. Mary is going to show you through what we cover on the call here today, how to do that. The second big thing is it keeps your income, your revenue stream safe. So if you're $1 million practice, but you have to pay a $500,000 fine, that's devastating. And that can be, that can close doors. We're literally talking about that. And she and her team, they understand every possible, I don't even know how many different things it is, but it's OSHA, HR, billing compliance, like any sort of compliance that you need to be thinking about as an owner, which most of us are trying to do ourselves, and it's very frustrating. She and her team have nailed. It is fantastic. They have different programs depending on the level of practice you're in. But if you are
So,
a real private practice owner, you want to pay attention to Mary DeLong. So, Mary, after that long-winded introduction, welcome to the call here.
boy, you set the bar high for me, don't you, Chip? But I always feel really good and invigorated after I hear all those nice things. Um, One, can y'all see me?
We can't see your webcam, but they can see your.
Okay, so I had my webcam was on. Huh. Let's see. Let's see here. Does that help? Nope.
Yeah,
That's just,
you just did it.
I just did it. Okay.
Yeah,
Where
whatever
do,
you just did.
okay, I just hit it. Because let's see. There
Oh,
I am. Okay. Okay, so that's good. So anyway, to live up to Chad's expectations, sometimes, as I said, sets the bar very high. And I will tell you this little bit of story about us. I am a PT. I've been a PT for a number of years. And the reason I'm doing this, the reason we have BCMS is because I was sitting in the same boat you were, trying to run a practice, trying to treat patients, trying to market. We did very little marketing. Had I known Chad back then, it would have been different. But, and found that we had no time to be able to really determine what we were expected to do in the world of compliance. Now, I sold my practice in '96, and that's really when compliance was started to be the buzzword, that type of thing. We did have OSHA in place. We've always had HR. HIPAA had not come into place then, and Medicare was just getting to the point that they were looking at drain on the federal fund through fraud and abuse. So this is when I said, when I sold my practice, I said, this is what I want to do. I want to take that burden of trying to find the right information and have that in place in an easy way for you to get to it. And so that's what we've done. We've developed policies and procedures, which really makes up the compliance program, and user-friendly tools so you guys can understand what is expected of you, can put processes in place. And when we come like to boot camp, or when we do these podcasts or those types of things, we want to provide you with the key things that would help you hopefully not only be compliant, but as Chad said, keep the money that you have earned. So we're going to start out now. Chad, you said progressive coding, redundant coding, and coding to purpose were all kind of in the same ranking.
Yeah, they were pretty high. Yep.
Okay, so let's talk about redundant coding first. And what that means is that you choose to use the same CPT code or code sets repetitively for all of your patients. So if I go in and I do an audit and I'm going to see Mrs. Smith, Mr. Jones, Mr. Black, all of those patients, different diagnoses, but typically they have 1 or 2 Therexes, 1 manual therapy, and 1 usually something else. And what that does when you are coding like that, it sets up a red flag from the claims perspective, because that goes in on the claims. The claims people say, Mary DeLong doesn't have a brain in her head. She treats everybody the same regardless of what their needs are, i.e. their diagnosis or condition. And you do it enough, and it's going to, they're going to say, maybe we better look at this. This doesn't look right. What can make that even more significant is if the entire clinic codes and bills that way. And we've seen it. I've certainly done some tests on my own. So for instance, I was in a clinic several years ago, and they coded 1 exercise, one eval, 1 re-eval, and 66, if I remember the numbers right, 66 therapeutic exercises. So I went back to the chart, I read the documentation, and those numbers were turned upside down. So they had 1 eval when I went back and coded, 1 re-eval, about 30 or 40 exercises, well, maybe not that many. I don't have my numbers with me right now, but there was gait training, there was therapeutic activity, there was neuromuscular, and there was exercise. And that showed what they were doing, and they were not coding to the purpose of what they were doing. Because when you go in and call everything exercise, it could actually, if done enough, be considered fraudulent, because you're not documenting what you've done. I mean, you're documenting what you've done, but it doesn't jive with what you're billing. So redundant coding is a red flag. And again, when we get into some of the coding methodologies, you'll understand why that might not be a favorable thing for you to do. So that's redundant coding. Coding to show progress. You can do this and it shows progress on the claim. And remember, the first place we are exposed is on the claims that we render. I'm seeing all kinds of things happening on this screen. Are y'all okay?
I'm here, Mary. Yep, I'm trying to get me off the screen so they can read your bio. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
You're good.
Okay. All right. So when we, let's see, this is progressive coding, right? So when we submit the claims and we coded redundantly, again, it doesn't show that the patient has done anything except exercise. So if you have a total knee patient and all they've done is exercise, I'm wondering, can they walk? And can they do functional things? So we really do ourselves a disservice. So when we look at progressive coding, and I'm a believer in exercise, people say, Mary, you just don't like exercise. But I do. It's a foundation. It's the definition is increase strength, increase range of motion, endurance, and flexibility. Those things are essential for almost every single one of our patients. So that's a foundation code, and we should certainly bill it. But if we're doing a foundation code all the way to the end of the episode, have we made the patient independent, and have we made them functional? And maybe we have, but we haven't coded it. So again, we go back to the coding to purpose. You've got to make sure that you code what you've done. So on the progressive coding, let's say that you do some exercise, you maybe blend in some neuromuscular balance things. A lot of our patients that have lower extremity conditions and injuries or surgery or whatever have balance issues. We work on those. Well, we need to code those, and that happens to be one of the codes that, well we'll get into the coding changes a little bit later. So what about your manual therapy? Our practice was spine. We did spinal mobilization, manipulation, treatment of the spine primarily. And my thought now, and I think we kind of weaned our patients off, maybe not as much as we should have, but now I really see things from a different perspective. Because, excuse me, when we treat a patient, our purpose should be to make them as functional as possible. And again, if we're doing the exercises all the way and it requires our skilled intervention, how can we just let them go at discharge when they're still requiring skilled intervention for exercise? So we should have moved them through that cycle of exercise so that they're independent. The same thing goes for manual therapy. How can we do manual therapy all the way to the end of the episode and feel good about discharging the patient, knowing the day before you felt it was essential that they had manual therapy? So if you just think about what you're saying by continuing that type of coding and that type of intervention throughout the episode, you can see how it might not generate a very positive opinion when auditors are looking at it, when payers are looking at us, actually when our peers look at us. So we want to make sure that we move that patient through the continuum. And when we start getting into more specific things, your neuromuscular, gait training is maybe not sophisticated with some of our simple knees and hips and whatever, but we have to do some. I mean, the patient's got to walk, and we've got to make sure that has happened, and we have evaluated their need for whether they need an adaptive device or whether they need more emphasis on their stride or whatever it is. So it's typically done and typically not coded. So I would encourage you to do that. But let's talk about therapeutic activities. I don't know how many of you use it, but could we get someone to say maybe a yes or a no? Do you use therapeutic activities? Say yes if you do, and no if you don't.
Mary, you have a ton of yeses coming through.
Okay.
I haven't seen a no yet, so we're up to about 15 or 20. Oh yeah, I can't. As soon as I start talking, there's more coming in. So mostly yeses. Okay. And I have a question then that I'd like to come back to just for you to expand on something a little bit. But yes, there's a ton of 97530s. Yep.
Okay, so hit me with the question. That's good.
Okay, so I'm on the call. I'm an owner, and I just like you just caught me. I'm a deer in the headlights, and it's like, hey, for 10 years, myself and our other two therapists have been billing 1 97140 and then 3 97110s. What do we do? Because that's very much the problem. Like where do I go? What can I do? Or is it just because what happens, at least for what happened for me and what happened for other owners, is I know now that I really need help, and I know that I'm doing something that makes me a red flag as a clinic, but it's change. And I don't want to tell my therapist what to do, and I certainly don't want to change how I've been doing it for the last 25 years. So
Okay.
can you walk me through that process about how can I do that the right way to get to the point where I'm not only doing it compliantly and ethically, and coding to purpose in the way that is correct, but that I'm also realizing that I was leaving money on the table for the
Yeah,
last 10 years.
absolutely. Okay. So the first thing that is, I think, critical is that all the therapists know the definition of the codes. And I would bet that the majority of therapists out there haven't really read the long definition of the CPT code. So when we look at, like, for therapeutic activities, it is performing dynamic activities to improve function. Well, function is what we're after. So wouldn't it make sense to use that? And obviously people are using that. And I think that is not what I've seen in the past, but we've been preaching it so much the last couple of years. I'm hoping that, y'all were doing it, but if you weren't, you picked that up in the last couple of years. So what happens when you code, like Chad said, yes, red flag, to kind of questionable, because doing a lot more than exercise and manual therapy, so that's kind of a shaky area. And let me stop for a second just so I can explain this part too. I told you things are read at the claims level. So you've got the claims people, all of a sudden they set a flag up. This looks like aberrant billing. And when they look at that, then they do the call for records. Chad understands that part. And everything that you do then is subject to the audit. So they're going to look for every area of compliance. They're going to look for signed plans of care. They're going to look for your progress. And we're talking about Medicare right now. Your timely progress reports, the content that you have met all of the requirements for all of the different documents. So that opens up Pandora's box, and that's usually where our vulnerability is the greatest, but it started because we were redundantly coding. So, and I totally agree with, okay, so tomorrow do we go back and code differently? I think you have to evaluate, and it wouldn't hurt to go back and look at some of your documentation and say, okay, so now I know that neuromuscular reeducation should have been built here, because in the definition it says balance, proprioception, I'll get it, kinesthetic awareness, posture. So if you're doing any of those things, you can code that code. And again, yes, there's going to be, did you do it long enough to meet the coding requirements for a unit? But looking at the definition and looking at your purpose, and I'll give you another little example. Probably some of you have heard me at boot camp use this example, and pardon me if it is redundant, but you can use the same device, for instance, a physio ball, to do core stabilization, to do balance, to do therapeutic activities. So we don't get hooked up on the device or the tool, but we look at what our purpose is. And we can easily reflect our purpose in just a short bullet point in our documentation, that we're working on posture, because the patient is, comes in with a postural issue or whatever. So using parts of the definition in your documentation really does help solidify that you are coding to the definition and what your purpose is. So back to Chad's question, how do I change? We go back, we educate the staff on the definitions. I would suggest that they audit a few charts of their own to go in and say, now that I know this, now that I know the definition, how would I change this? And let them do a little bit of self-assessment on that. Once that self-assessment is done, then it is a slow process. It can be fast, but I mean, usually it's kind of it's a change, and change happens more gradually. Go in and try to focus on thinking of the code when you are initiating that bill and that charge code. So I know what Chad wants me to get to, and that is the AMA coding methodology versus the Medicare coding methodology. And I'd like to ask one more question, Chad, if you can tell me, how many of you are using the AMA coding, unit coding methodology on most of or all of your non-federal patients, payer patients?
One yes. Two yeses. Three. Using CMS, not AMA.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, yes. No. Yep, yes. Here you got the right. I don't know the difference.
Okay, there you go. So let's talk about the difference. In 2012, the AMA probably said, okay, we'll explain what a unit is. Because a unit can, typically our units are 15 minutes, but physicians may have 30-minute codes, they may have hour codes or whatever. And how much into that unit of time justifies billing that particular code. So they came out with their definition, and it was that it was one-on-one or face-to-face time for greater than 50% of the unit value. So for us, that would be 7 minutes and 51 seconds. Okay, so we'll round up to 8 just to make it simple. So why does that make a difference? And why do I care? Sounds like the 8-minute rule. Well, unfortunately, because the 8-minute rule, and then we've got 8 minutes or greater than 50% of our units, it is a little confusing. But they have 2 different methodologies. As you know, Medicare takes all of the minutes, so all of your time to minutes, they add them up, and then you divide basically by 15 to get how many units of service. They don't care what type of CPT code it is. It strictly has to do with the time spent in one-on-one activities. The AMA is different. It has the greater than 50%, so we're going to go back to 8, but they do it per CPT code. So when you, so when you are trying to code for your non-federal payers, and let me qualify that too. Federal payers, Medicare, Medicaid, TRICARE, VA. You may have other payers who endorse Medicare payment methodology, and that means you have to know your contracts or their coverage terms. But the majority of commercial payers will endorse the AMA's method. And the AMA's method is truly really the Bible for those, because we have to adhere to the AMA's CPT code definitions. We can't stray from those. So the definition in their methodology that was introduced now for the coding is critically important and is recognized by all non-Medicare methodology payers. So we have 8 minutes of therapeutic exercise, let's say, or let's just say 10 minutes. 10 minutes of therapeutic exercise. Chad was doing 3 exercises and 1 manual. Is that right, Chad? Okay, so for AMA, I saw your head shaking. So for AMA, you would have to get to the first 15 minutes, because that's a unit. They're saying at least 50%. But when you have multiple units, they're going to expect you to get to 15 minutes of the first exercise time. They're going to expect you to get to another 15 minutes because you have 3 codes, and then at least 8 minutes for the third code. So that means that you are going to not be able to capture the true benefit of correct coding. And again, we're saying he threw everything kind of into the basket of therapeutic exercise. If you have, and then he would have 1 unit of manual therapy. but he would only have, if you have those three, remember, you don't get individual benefit. Let's go back to, and I didn't explain that as well as I want, so I'm going to look at the reference.
Mary, can I give an example of how I saw it and how well it worked?
Sure. I am going to get to the individual, so okay.
That's okay. So when we would bill that, the 97140,110 times 3, like now I look back at that as like being lazy, like because we were doing a lot of neuromuscular re-ed, we were doing a ton of therapeutic activity. We were we were doing gait training. It wasn't a real reflection of what we were doing in the clinic, but we just got lazy with it. Like that's what we did, and everybody was doing it. It was just kind of the thing to do. But anyhow, when we started working with BCMS, so Medicare, exactly what Mary explained, the 8-minute rule, it's total units. And if we see somebody for 50 minutes, it's pretty much 3 units. However, when you look at AMA billing, we might have done 5 different modalities for 10 minutes each. So we might have done 10 minutes of manual, 10 minutes of therapeutic exercise, 10 minutes of therapeutic activity, 10 minutes of neuromuscular re-ed, and then had them on maybe traction for 10 minutes. So that we could really be billing 5 codes, because each one of those modalities is over the 7.5 minutes, half of the code. So it doesn't seem like it's a big deal. It is a giant deal. And I know, like, if you're on this call and again, it's, oh, they're going to tell me everything that I'm doing wrong. When I was going through it, I hated it. When we popped out on the other end, I'm like, wow, this was the greatest thing that we ever did. I want to just do something here, because I know we have a lot of owners that have a ton of questions, and we're going to get to those in a second. But the way that I understand that the BCMS team works with owners, Mary, is you, at least at the very lowest level, that like everybody on this call that is in the US should be doing, is they have a manual that the BCMS team walks you through. So you have all that paperwork. So you don't have to go out to, I don't know if LegalZoom does it, but you don't have to go out and piece together everything so you're compliant for 14 different organizations, including HIPAA and everything else. They do that for you. If you're if you're in business and you're seeing like 50 visits a week, like I would get that in as soon as possible, because it just protects you. The other thing for the larger practices that really that are thinking about expanding, or you are expanding, and like let's say you're over 500K a year, like I would, in revenue, I would be thinking about a site visit, because you're likely leaving a lot of money on the table. The BCMS team is going to identify that. Otherwise, what it's left up to, like what I used to try to do, is I or my staff would go research bits and pieces, and then we would try to assimilate it, and it just didn't work nearly as well as when Mary came in and she just said, I know compliance, our team knows compliance, we're going to get this in, and then it worked. So just something to think about here.
Okay, and thank you for showing that. I think the thing that what we want to say is to get to 3 units with Medicare, you have to get to 38 to 52 minutes, okay? With AMA, using the greater than 50% rule, you can do, and I would not suggest everything sit at 8 minutes, okay? I'm truly not recommending that, but I'm just saying in a scenario, you can have 10 minutes of therapeutic exercise, 10 minutes of manual therapy, 10 minutes of whatever, and each one of those qualifies as a unit. It's not the aggregate, it's the individual. And that's where we talk about leaving money on the table, because if you use the CMS 8-minute rule for a payer that really you should be using the AMA methodology, you are leaving money on the table, because you have to have, that would be, let's just say 3 units at 8 minutes each, that is 24 minutes. 24 minutes will get you 2 units for Medicare, 3 units for AMA. We do have a little short, I call it a mini PowerPoint on this with examples, and if you're interested in getting that, if you'll put your email address in on the chat, and just state, and we'll ask we'll offer a number of things to you that way also. So we still have other things to cover, and I think, Chad, what would be the next item you'd like us to hit on?
So if there's any one thing that you want to cover, Mary, that's great. There's a ton of questions in the log, and Eddie can start walking through that.
Let's do that. I don't have a need to cover anything. I want to do what the audience would like.
Great. So Eddie will moderate the questions here. Also, if at the end, I think Alicia's on this call, or somebody else from your team. By the way, first maxed out call ever. So we can only host 101 here. But Alicia's on the call. Just make sure, because a ton of people are putting their emails in, if there's a way that you can, people that want to learn more about your compliance programs, the different levels, just make sure you make that available to them. So yeah, I want to make sure that happens. Great. Thanks for doing this, Mary. Yep.
Okay, let's go with the questions.
Awesome.
Excellent. Right on. Can you hear me?
Definitely.
Excellent. Well, Mary, we've got tons of emails pouring in for people who want more of your wisdom here. So I'm going to scroll up to the top of our questions, and we'll get started on answering some of these. So if you're a member and you've asked a question, you can go ahead and unmute yourself, and we can engage in a dialogue here. So one of the first questions that you might have answered already was from Bob Kalanko, which is, how do you find out if the insurance company is AMA or CMS billing?
Well, it's not easy, okay? You can assume your federal payers are. In some states, workers' comp carriers have stated that they endorse Medicare methodology. So you would have to know that. Your payer contracts, unfortunately, don't stipulate that. So you really need to ask them when you are signing your contracts or renewing your contracts, please tell me payment policy. And they won't know what you're talking about when you say AMA, payment methodology. You're probably going to have to say, ask them whether they use Medicare methodology for payment. And if you can't get that answer, then I would default to AMA, because typically the ones that are using Medicare methodology somewhere in coverage policy, they will state Medicare. But that means you have to read. It is a challenge. We've been working on projects of trying to get this kind of information from payers. It is very challenging. But I think you could, with good conscience, default to AMA if they are not federal.
Awesome. And Bob, if you've got, and by the way, as I read off these questions, if one of you has a follow-up question, by all means, just unmute yourself and we can get into a dialogue there. So Bob, I'll just give you a minute here if you had a follow-up question about that, just to gain clarity. Looks like he's going to stay muted, so we're good. So I'm going to move on to Matt Slimming's question here. So Matt, you're on here. You're welcome to unmute yourself. And question was, are Medicare Advantage programs AMA or CMS?
I knew that one's going to come up. They have a choice. I know that's not fair, but they do have a choice. And what we typically recommend, and it just kills me to say this because this could be leaving money on the table, I would probably default to Medicare on those Medicare Advantage plans. And the reason for that is because it is so easy for patients to say, this didn't turn out to be a good plan, and switch back to traditional. They will do that when they have their enrollment opportunities during the year. It could be in the middle of an episode of Care for You, and if they go back, excuse me, to Medicare, you could lose the first part of that episode because you weren't coding appropriately for Medicare. No functional limitation reporting, no supervision requirements like Medicare. So unless you can find other language, I would probably default to Medicare for the Medicare Advantage.
Yes, thanks, Mary. yeah, it seems that most of them have some CMS language in their contract, so that's kind of what we've done is default to that. Just wanted to share with everybody that we did engage Mary Services, I guess 4 or 5 years ago. Mary, not sure if you recall, in Louisiana, but yeah, it was one of those experiences that you go in holding your breath because you don't want to find anything ugly, but it was a great experience, and you know, it was very helpful to make sure that the very few things that we had to tweak, she let us know. So yeah, don't be scared of reaching out to Mary.
Thank you so much, Matt.
Thank you, man.
Great testimonial from
I love
Mr.
it.
Matt.
We're
Yeah.
recording this, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I'll send you the file after this, Mary.
Okay. Sounds great.
Thanks very much, Matt. Sorry your team lost in football the other day. We got Kelly McFarland. You say in AMA you can bill 5 units if you do 5 different codes, 10 minutes each.
That would be true. Now you have to be cognizant of whether your payer allows 5 units to ever be billed in a per visit. So you have to know that. I wouldn't encourage anyone to be billing 5 units unless they have a patient with multiple conditions, but that is true. So it's at the individual code level. So if you are using individual, separate and distinct CPT codes, anything over the 8 minutes is allowable to be billed as one code, 1 unit.
Okay, awesome. And can I follow up with that as far as group? Can you talk a little bit about group therapy codes with Medicare?
Okay, group therapy applies to all payers if their policy pays for it. Now, any payer can say, I don't pay for this procedure, that procedure, or whatever. So assuming that they do not have we do not recognize group therapy, then that can apply to everyone. And I think it's very, very important, and this is something that we really answered a lot of questions about at boot camp this time, is one-on-one is in the definition of your procedure codes. Okay, so it says therapeutic exercise performed by physician or therapist, one-on-one. Therapeutic activities, manual therapy, neuromuscular rehab, all of those are one-on-one code by definition. HIPAA requires standardization of code sets. So that means the definition can't change, and every single payer that's a health plan has to use and recognize that definition, and they hold you to that. So all of your commercial payers that you are working with, you treat like Medicare as far as the definition. So one-on-one for Blue Cross is one-on-one, and one-on-one for Medicare is one-on-one. There is no, oh, we don't have to do one-on-one for other payers. That's not a Medicare regulation. That is a stipulation made by AMA when they developed the CPT code definition. So it applies to all payers. And I know right now there's probably a bunch of people out there banging their head on their desk saying, you gotta be kidding. Okay. Now, as far as group, there are very, very good, easy, and ethical ways to use group codes. And what we have found recently, especially from the commercial payers, is they are auditing people who only do one-on-one, because they are saying, we're looking at the volume you have, we're looking at how many visits are billed under your MPI per day, and it looks impossible. It looks like you're working 24/7. Some of this surely should have been group. So we are definitely seeing them audit that. And you know, it does put you in a very difficult position when you haven't been using that one-on-one code appropriately and possibly should have been group. And we could do a whole session on group codes, how you effectively use a group code. And it is a really good tool. We highly recommend it.
Mary, this is great, and it speaks to why this is the first time in BPTM's history we've had a completely full call. So yeah, it's great. So I'm gonna just share that mini presentation again. I just posted it at the bottom, as there was about half the attendees on this call wanted that. So I've just posted it again. You should be able to access that.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Now, Mary, your webcam, you had it working before. If you're able to try that again, we can't see you.
Okay, I'm
No.
sorry.
We'd all like to.
Are you, let me see.
There we go. Yep. Yep.
Now, are we okay?
There we go.
Okay,
Yep.
great.
Perfect. Mary. All right, so now we've got Sarah Morrison, and her question was, Mary, my state PT. Yeah, that's right. My state PT Act says that I cannot suggest vitamins. Is it okay if my clinic sells them and all questions are fielded by a non-PT, for example, a wellness coach or a trainer?
Did you say vitamins?
Cannot suggest vitamins.
Oh, okay. So when we have, and that's not within our scope of practice, it as far as using whether it's pharmaceuticals or vitamins, those types of things. It is not mentioned in our practice act. I would say that trying to recommend anything like that could put you in a precarious position. It doesn't mean you can't sell it. What we have found, at least in Texas, is that as long as you give a patient the option to choose something, whether it is a lumbar roll or TheraBand or vitamins, if you post that and you have it there and it's for their availability, and you are saying, well, I use them, but you can't promote it or whatever, or you can go to Walgreens and get the same thing, that's what you want to make certain you give that patient the option. I certainly wouldn't be preaching the value of any of those to the point that it would maybe cause the patient to purchase that unit just from you because you said it was superior.
Excellent. Sarah, you are welcome to unmute yourself if you have any follow-up questions in there. Nope. So we're going to move on.
Okay.
Excellent. So next question is from Samir, and he sent this to me in private here, so I'll just read it off. He said, we typically code 97110 3 times with 1 2 units and 2 1 units, along with 97014 with 1 unit. We are purely a manual-based physical therapy practice. So should we say from these codes and split into 5 codes you mentioned?
Okay, so we're going to roll back. I don't want to encourage anyone to build 5 codes. We're going to code to purpose and to definition. I would suspect, now we were a manual therapy clinic as well, but you are doing manual techniques, and again, I'm going to repeat from an ethical perspective. If we are treating our patients all the way to the end with manual techniques and have given them nothing to be independent with, so self-mob techniques, any type of functional activities, once we get somebody aligned, okay, there's a next step, and the next step is to see whether they can do that in the real world. Can they keep their SI aligned when they're walking, when they're sitting, all the day-to-day activities, which you should be checking out in the clinic. So those go into your therapeutic activities to see if what you've taught them between doing and your mobilization or soft tissue or whatever work you're doing, whether you have established enough, say, core strength to hold that, and then test them in that environment to see that indeed they have the capability of keeping that alignment in everyday activities. And so I certainly would encourage you to get into those. I mean, there are certain balance activities that could test whether your techniques are holding continuously to adjust someone. Doesn't mean it's going to stick. So we have exercise that we need to pull into that. And again, looking at it in the real world situation, in functional activities.
Excellent. And Samir, if you're on here, Samir, I believe you're unmuted. Nope. Okay, I think he's all good. Excellent. Yeah, got the thank you. So the next question here is from Shirley Dreyer. Hey, Shirley. We have problems getting manual therapy and therapeutic activity paid in the same visit. It's not exactly framed as a question, but maybe you can speak to that a little bit.
Sure. I'm assuming that's Medicare, and that's because they're bundled codes. They are part of the Correct Coding Initiative program, which bundles codes. I know bundling manual therapy and therapeutic activities sounds ridiculous, because in my mind, I can't imagine doing some type of mobilization technique while I have somebody up doing what we call IMG activities. So it's standing, bending, lifting, all those types of things. I don't think I ever tried to treat a patient with manual therapy when they were doing things. So it doesn't make sense, but it is a bundled code, and you need to add the 59 modifier to the column 2 code. We do have a resource document, which I'm glad to share with you, that shows where you affix that 59 modifier to get both of those codes paid. And one thing that's important in your documentation, though, you have to show or demonstrate that those techniques are done separate and distinct from each other. So you would say, for instance, mechanical traction and manual therapy are also bundled codes. So you could say cervical traction followed by manual therapy, or you could have different parts, but you definitely want to use something that will absolutely show that they are separate and distinct, not performed concurrently.
Perfect. So good. Shirley, if you're on, if you have any follow-up questions here, you're welcome to unmute yourself. All right, moving on then to Jennifer. Oh, Shirley, yeah, I just saw you unmuted yourself.
Sorry, my computer's working slowly here. The clarification helped significantly there. I guess I kind of knew about the 59, but I didn't. But thank you for the specific examples. I really like your calling therapeutic activity and ing activity. I can use that with my staff.
That's right. We always laugh out. We've had some very interesting comments from patients asking if certain activities that they are doing are functional if they put an ing to them, and you could just let your imagination go from there.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Oh, and one point. Please don't let your billing companies or your front office add those 59 modifiers without knowing that you have documented that they are separate and distinct. Because when it comes down to audits, if they see that the 59's there and they can't tell if they're separate and distinct, you'll lose definitely both of the codes.
Perfect. Awesome. So our next question's coming in is from Jennifer. It might be Jennifer Fremgen, but it doesn't say the last name. I'm not sure. But either way, Jennifer, her question is, she was just wanting more information on group code in the future, please. Okay,
we definitely can do, a short podcast, or we can do a long session. It has a lot of value. I would encourage you to go, if you are members of the APTA, to go to their website. They have 11 scenarios on one-on-one and group coding that allow you to read the scenario and then to make the assessment, whether it's group or one-on-one, and then they tell you what the rationale behind the actual coding properly.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Sure.
Oh, okay. So just the basics, I've never coded group. The purpose of it is if you have overlap up to Medicare patients and they're both in the clinic exercising at the same time, you could use group, correct? Like basic?
That is kind of right, but remember, group applies to all payers, so not just Medicare. So a quick situation. Remember, group requires skill. Group is not a timed code, but it should be done within the same unit of time. You can't do two things at one time. So you're going to have one before the other. You have two patients coming in at the same time. I don't care what payer. You put one on the treadmill and you put one on a bike. Those activities in and of themselves are not skilled. But if you teach the patient on the treadmill, you're working on stride, you're working on posture, you're working on exercise heart rate, and you teach them that thing, okay, that becomes skill. You go to the patient on the ergometer and you are teaching them the proper adjustment of the device, how to complete the activity, how to increase the intensity, whatever. Both of those become skilled, and both of those patients would then have one on, group codings. They each would have a group code. You do have to say how many people are in the group when you document and what the activity was, and that's when you want to prove your skill. Taught the patient exercise heart rate. Taught the patient proper ergometer operation, whatever, just so you can see. And we do have a documented skill terminology. So if y'all are interested in that, again, that would be something you could send to request.
Okay.
Awesome. Very good. So we've got another about 7 minutes here until we're on the top of the hour. And this next question is coming in from Betty. So if I have two patients in my open clinic and one is exercising and I'm correcting them while doing MT on another, should I bill group for TA or TE?
You have to have two people in a group. So if you're doing two things simultaneously, that becomes a group. You can't, one-on-one is one-on-one. You cannot be coaching another patient. Now, I'm going to tell you, in the good old days when I practiced, we could do a lot of things concurrently. And I know I've held someone's head in my hand, fraction, and watching somebody from the corner of my eye and telling them that's not how I tell them to do that exercise. Or someone saying, okay, let's go back and look at body mechanics again. All of that, we all know we can dovetail. It's just, unfortunately, it's not an approved skill. And
hey,
somebody
sorry, just 1 sec. If I can just interrupt. Alejandra, if you wouldn't mind just muting your mic there, we can just hear some background noise.
Good.
Awesome, thank you. Sorry, please continue.
So that's what I wanted to say. So it's not, you're not using group for one or the other. Both of those would be group because you have disqualified the one that you're doing some MT on, basically. So you'd have to put those both as group.
All right.
And when you use group therapy, does not mean that you cannot then do individual one-on-ones with your patients, because if you use that scenario that I had, once you've established that and maybe you're using someone to monitor the patient for safety or whatever, then you can go in and say, okay, I really want to work, let's get you on the mat. I want to do some manual therapy, and you accomplish a unit of time and you bill it. All of those are certainly things that we do. And again, when you use the group code, you will have to affix a 59 modifier.
Thanks, Mary. And this next one's from Kelly McFarland. So are you able to bill for 2 PTs at one time?
2 PTs at one time? Concurrent therapy, is that what you're talking about? If it is, no, not routinely. There are a couple of situations that I know that a few payers have approved concurrent therapy, but no, usually if you've got 2 therapists, you're going to bill for, and let's say it was in 30 minutes, 15 minutes of one and 15 minutes of another.
Awesome. Very good. And Kelly, I saw you muted yourself there, so it doesn't look like you've got a follow-up. Alejandra, again, I'll just ask you to mute here. We can hear some background noise from you. So if you're able to just mute, that would help out the whole call. Thank you.
Yes, this is Kelly. I was just a follow-up. I was talking about patients at one time. So if I'm doing 2 patients at one time and they're AMA billing, and we can't bill them while they're both exercising on the bike.
Now, again, your group therapy is going to prevail on that one. One-on-one means one-on-one. Amen. There's no exception. That means your attention is undivided. It's only that patient. And lots of background noise.
Yeah. Alejandro, we're going to need you to mute here. I just sent you a message, so if you can hear us, please mute your cam there. I can't, unfortunately, I can't do it from here, but we'll just ask you to mute there. Thank you very much. All right.
One thing while we're waiting, I would tell you that if we roll back to the coding to purpose, not coding redundantly, and looking at the codes that you really should be recording as performed, with the new reduction in the CPT codes, I think that you will find you won't be leaving as much money on the table if you code progressively, if you code to purpose, because some of the codes that we're not using is often has significant increases that overcome the therapeutic exercise and the manual therapy losses that we have.
Excellent. Kelly, anything else? All good. Perfect. Then we're going to move on to Damon here. Hey, Damon. What's up, man? So what is the ratio auditors are looking at with respect to utilizing the group code? Is it purely mathematics by dividing the hours by the patients and therapists?
You know, the thing is, I can't answer that question because I don't think that they would give me their proprietary techniques, but what they look at, and again, for those who use PTA, and I'm not telling you not to use them, I think you know, apple pie, but they're going to look at how many patient visits, not visits, units of service are billed under your NPI. That's going to be a big one. So if we had two PTAs working under your NPI, and let's just say you only did 8 patients each, that's 24 patients that are 24 patients that you're going to have units of service. So they're looking at a number of things that make them evaluate whether it's aberrantly built. Now, they do take in consideration you have PTAs, but if they see a really heavy number of CPT codes per day regularly for the same therapy, it probably is a red flag. And if you're doing everything right, and those units are because you have PTAs working with you, they'll see that in the audit. But if you don't document well, then it could be a problem. You're welcome.
Perfect. We've got time for maybe one, perhaps 2 more questions. So I'm just still going through in order, but there's been so much interest in everything that you do, Mary. So it's a testament to your expertise. So this last or second.
I love it. So it's great.
Oh yeah, we love your enthusiasm. So here is one more from, it doesn't say the name, but question is, on the day that a progress note is performed as well as treatment, is it better to bill for the treatment only or include the progress charge as well? We've noticed that once the PN charge is used, you do not get paid for the treatment. Thoughts on this?
I have not seen treatments being denied because of a progress report, but the bottom line is we don't get paid for a progress report. Okay, so I don't know if this is a Medicare issue or another payer issue, but the progress report is not a billable service. It's incorporated in the overall treatment of the patient. Excellent.
Right on. And sorry if we're at the top of the hour, everyone. So if we're cutting into your time, Mary, just let me know. We could go over another 2 questions if you're open to it.
That's fine.
Yeah, sure. Then we'll cover Teresa, and Sarah had some other questions, and then I apologize for the rest. We won't be able to get to them in the duration of this call. So our next question is from Teresa. What about manual therapy and massage? Can you use the 59 modifier?
Yes, absolutely.
Perfect. Easy. Next question, and from Sarah Morrison. For Medicare, can we bill revals for the progress note on the 10th visit?
No, and that's an absolute. And because evaluation has very specific criteria, and it was even intensified this past year, 2017, when they changed the code. So no, they'll be watching for that, and especially if they saw a reeval every 10th visit. That would be considered aberrant billing and definitely a red flag.
You covered those so quickly. We'll do one more, and this one's from Luann here. And her question was, so you can bill / code for cervical traction and a manual therapy and manual treatment in the same treatment. We always document as separate TX, but they get down coded and we only get paid for the traction.
I would guess that you're affixing the 59 modifier to the wrong code. So there is a specific code it has to be affixed to. And again, we do have a resource document we're glad to share with you. We're in the process of adding the brand new codes for 2018, but we certainly have a document that was current through December, and we could share that.
Awesome. Well, that's fantastic, and we'll call it there. There's a few more, so I apologize if you posted a question and we didn't get to it. But Mary, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your time and your expertise with our community. So, is there just any last words or any last ideas or thoughts you'd like to share with the group before we wrap it up?
I think the thing that I would like to encourage you to do is just to look at your documentation, look at your coding. After hearing what we've talked about, see if there is room for improvement. We'd be glad to do individual courses, site visits, whatever. But I think once you look at it and with this knowledge, you can determine whether, hey, we have a little room for improvement, and it won't be quite as difficult to accept. And again, what Chad said is true. He was very concerned that he was going to lose money because of some of the things we recommended, but actually he's not leaving money on the table now, and he's keeping the money that he earned so hard.
Excellent. Well, that's great. Thank you so much, Mary, for sharing your time again. And this call has been recorded, so for everyone on the call, this will be posted to your portal by the end of the week. Mary, I'll send you the file following this call so that. Oh, and did you want to say something? I think you might have been muted.
Oh, no, I'm fine.
Oh, I thought I saw your lips moving.
Yeah,
so,
I was probably licking them here.
well, yes, but Mary, thank you again so much. And I know everyone appreciated this call. Again, the first time in our history that we've had a completely maxed out call with 101 attendees. So that's all you. So thank you again, Mary.
Thank you so much. You have a great one. Bye-bye.
You as well. Take care, everyone.
Yes.